Michelin. I'm going to share my screen really quick. And so today I'm going to be talking to you about plant-based diets. And if you read the description for this session, you'll know that when we talk about plant-based diets, that doesn't mean that we necessarily exclude all animal foods, although there are some cases where people might do that. But we just encourage that we focus on more plant-based foods in the diet overall to increase health and wellness. So one of the factors that I really wanted to talk about is the fact that in lifestyle medicine, which is one of the things that I'm certified in, and really where this plant-based diet is emphasized quite extensively, there are other pieces to the puzzle when we talk about overall health and wellness. And so I just wanted to run through those quickly, but it's regular physical activity, a diet rich in plants, connectedness. So making sure that you have socially and intellectually stimulating activities that helps with mental health and keeping us vital and connected to our community. And then also quality sleep. I think people don't really realize the role that sleep plays in overall health and wellness. Mitigating stress, so making sure that you take little stress breaks, especially now that we're working almost 24/7 online. And preventing or stopping use of substances and smoking. So let's jump right in. When we talk about healthy diet patterns and plant-based diets, we know that a healthy diet helps us to have a healthy body overall. So I'm going to go over 3 plant-based diet patterns with you. So that's going to include the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, lifestyle medicine, and then I'm going to go through some of the caveats that we see with all 3 diets. So supplementation, people often ask about that. Alcohol is another big topic, especially for people who are trying to be super healthy and athletes. And then we're going to talk about myths and tips and give you some resources to use if your goal is to follow a plant-based diet. So let's start with DASH. So the DASH diet has been proven to reduce blood pressure, LDL or bad cholesterol, and also aid in weight loss. It requires no special foods. Instead, it kind of provides a daily and weekly nutritional goal. So you're not eating certain things on certain days. You're just looking at that bigger picture of your overall diet. And it recommends eating vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, which means you can include fat-free or low-fat dairy products, fish, poultry, beans, nuts, and vegetable oils on this diet. But you want to limit foods that are high in saturated fat, such as fatty meats, full-fat dairy products, and tropical oils, such as coconut and palm. And then you also want to limit sugar-sweetened beverages and sweets. And so one thing that we typically see with people who are vegetarian is that they still tend to eat a lot of sugar. So the goal would be really increasing those vegetables and fruits and whole grains in your diet to give you the carbohydrate, and then minimizing those simple sugars. And we'll talk more about that. So the Mediterranean diet is the best and most extensive, has the best and most extensive evidence for overall health benefits. It's been shown to improve longevity, prevents many chronic diseases and cancer, reduces inflammation, and improves mood, fertility, and cognitive function. One thing I really like about the Mediterranean diet, and not that lifestyle medicine didn't emphasize this as well, but it also emphasizes that connectedness. Meals should be shared with friends or family when possible, and then they also talk about physical activity, which I like. So also here, the meals should be based on vegetables, fruits and grains, legumes, healthy oils, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices. Now this diet also does still allow some animal foods such as fish or seafood, poultry, dairy, eggs eaten moderately, wine in moderation, and drinking water, plenty of water. Many of us don't get enough water in our lives, especially with all the variety of sugar-sweetened beverages and alcoholic beverages and other things that are out there on the market. So Again, it minimizes sweets, but then also in this particular diet, minimizes other meats besides the fish and poultry. So lifestyle medicine is really more swayed towards the vegetarian lifestyle. It really maximizes the intake of whole plant foods and minimizes the intake of processed and animal-derived foods. So it eliminates processed foods, added sugars, oils, refined flour. So it's much more strict, you can see. And then also it eliminates animal products for the most part, including meat, poultry, fish and seafood, dairy, and eggs, although it does allow salmon and other omega-3 fatty acid rich fish, which we'll look at in a little bit. But in common conversation, it's most likely to be what's called a low-fat vegan diet compared to the DASH diet or the Mediterranean diet. And if you are going to get that strict with your diet, it's probably recommended that you meet with a registered dietitian who's trained in lifestyle medicine. And if you are just looking to get a healthier diet overall and follow some of these plant-based food recommendations, maybe a lifestyle medicine health coach. So the consensus among these diets, because now you're like, well, which one should I follow? Well, really, it's up to you. It's a personal preference. But the consensus is that you want to eat plenty of fresh fruit and non-starchy vegetables every day. Focus on plant foods to increase fiber, vitamins, and minerals, because we know that those components of food really help to increase our health. They help digestive function, antioxidants in terms of aging and other chronic diseases that we might have as a result of aging, and other lifestyle habits. So just overall, adding more vegetables into your daily diet. If you just, you're like, okay, I want to get started on this road, what do I need to do? Focus on the green leafy vegetables, including fruits, especially berries, nuts, beans, and whole grains, lean meats, fish, and poultry, again, depending on how far you want to go towards the lifestyle medicine end of the spectrum, and focus on plant-based proteins and fish. And so I'm going to give you some examples of those in just a minute as well. And then choose healthy fats such as vegetable oil, nuts, and avocado. The other consensus among all the diets presented is that you should avoid processed foods and deep fried foods. We know that these foods are very low in nutritional value, but at the same time high in calories, sodium, and fats such as saturated fats. And then also limit or cut out the sugar sweetened beverages, because that's pretty much straight sugar. So what about supplements? I get this question a lot. Well, what we do know is that dietary supplements and nutraceuticals are made for people with nutritional deficiencies. So unless you have a diagnosed nutritional deficiency, you probably don't need to be taking a supplement. So you would need to check with your physician or your registered dietitian. So it should be only used under the supervision of a provider. There's little or no regulation of supplements. So you could be taking something that actually could harm you rather than help you. They often make false claims. They're not recognized as drugs by the definition of the FDA, so that means that they're not regulated. They may be potentially dangerous, as I mentioned. They can interact with other medications. So if you're on blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, diabetes medications, things that adults are typically on, then you need to be very careful. May disrupt your natural body function. So the last thing you want to do is be taking something that's hampering you from health when you're trying to be healthy. And they may cite research, but they're not held to the same FDA standards. So what about alcohol? That's another question I'm often asked. So a glass or two of red wine is thought to actually have health benefits, but that doesn't mean that we want you to start drinking if you don't already drink. Excess alcohol can actually have negative consequences, and we know that as a general rule, I think, but it slows or impairs brain cell communication, which means it can impair our functioning, can give us fuzzy memory or drowsiness, which we definitely don't want to have while we're driving. long-term changes in terms of balance, memory, emotions, coordination, or body temperature. So there are long-term detriments of heavy alcohol intake. Contributes to falls and fall-related injuries, especially in the elderly. It can interact negatively again with many of your medications and can have life-threatening consequences. So how much is just moderation? Well, interestingly, that's 1 drink per day for women and 2 drinks per day for men. So think about, do I limit my drinking to that much? And just because we say 1 drink per day or 2 drinks per day doesn't mean you can save them all up and have 7 to 14 on the weekend. You really need to stick with the moderation from day to day. So if you look at the serving sizes for beer or a malt beverage, it's 12 ounces. For liquor, it's 1.5 ounce in a drink. For wine coolers, about 12 ounces because they're diluted with other beverages. And then for wine, it's 5 ounces. And when you typically go to a restaurant, they say, do you want the small pour or the large pour? Well, that's the small pour. So here's some easy to use little tools that I like for when people ask me, you know, I'm walking down this hallway at school or what have you, and they say, you know, what can I do to change my diet, or how can I, and I recommend these little tools because they're super easy to just kind of start changing your thinking about eating. So to go more towards the plant-based slant, I would definitely use the Harvard plate, and the you can just Google that for to find that online. I have it linked to the presentation, which I'm not really sure if that's going to be uploaded or where you might be able to access that later, but we will certainly make that available. And then another one that I really like is choosemyplate.gov, and I like it because it's simple to use. So if someone is not super well versed on plant-based foods or doesn't have you know, a lot of access to information that's more detailed, it gives them a good idea of, oh, there actually is balance in what we eat, and instead of, you know, a Big Mac and fries or a big hamburger and fries, or other fast foods, I could actually have, you know, a planned meal that would include all of these particular foods that are actually in the food groups that I should be eating. So protein, grains, fruits, vegetables, dairy, milk, other plant-based beverages that you might want to use if you don't use dairy or milk. So there are some myths surrounding plant-based diets, and the first one I'd like to address is that there's a myth that you have to consume milk or dairy to meet your calcium needs, but the fact is there are many non-dairy sources of calcium. So all of these myths and facts that I'm going over are available on lifestylemedicine.org as handouts. So feel free to obtain these, because you probably aren't going to be able to write these down as fast as I'm going to go through them. But just want to make you aware that there are plant-based sources of calcium. The second myth is that carbohydrates are bad for you. And so I mentioned earlier about eating complex carbohydrates instead of, you know, sugar and sweets if you are going more towards a plant-based diet. And I think sometimes people try to minimize their carbohydrates too much, and they end up craving those sweets and those sodas because they are too low on carbohydrates. So the important thing to remember is that not all carbs are created equal. And so you do want to include vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, beans, and legumes. They provide energy and essential nutrients that are health promoting. And we do need those in our diet. And we want to aim for about 25 grams of fiber each day, which these actually provide. So we do know also that a healthy diet leads to a healthy brain. And with the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's becoming more prevalent in the US, and because we have an aging population, plant-based foods, especially fruits and vegetables, which I just was emphasizing as knowing that we need to include these carbohydrates, contain these important vitamins and minerals that we need to help preserve cognitive function and to prevent Alzheimer's disease. So preventable harm that we could abate just through our diet. Another myth is that most people don't get enough protein, so people worry about taking meat or animal-based foods out of their diet, but that's not true. The average person actually consumes too much protein. So the average person in the US consumes about 80 grams of protein per day. And if you see in the graphic, men need about 56 grams and women about 46 grams. And that's based on the age range from 19 to 51 and more years old. So that adult age range, but your protein needs do change as you age and when you're younger. So again, a registered dietitian would be a good source to find out what your exact protein needs are. What type of fish? We mentioned this earlier, fish that contain omega-3 fatty acids, so sardines, anchovies, salmon, trout, and oysters. And then not good sources would be tilapia, catfish, orange roughy, cod, and shrimp. So that's why the lifestyle medicine diet recommends more so the salmon. And the last myth is that you need to eat animal protein to meet your protein needs, and that is also untrue. Plenty of protein can be obtained through plant foods, and you can see here where many of those foods are, that things like lentils and beans that I mentioned before in the protein category, and then, you know, comparatively ounce per ounce with meat. They rank pretty high up there in terms of grams of protein. So the other thing you can do is combine plant-based proteins to raise up that level of grams that are available. So there's rice and black beans, hummus and bread, corn and black-eyed peas, bulgur and whole wheat, tofu and rice, corn and lima beans, tortillas with refried beans, and pea soup with bread. Other ways to get vegetarian meals that would typically contain meat, if you're wanting to go more plant-based, is add vegetables and take out the meat to things like pasta primavera, pasta with marinara, all of these things that we typically would add meat to, but you can add vegetables, beans, lentils, etc. So here's some tips and another plate-based graphic that you can use. Again, these are available on lifestylemedicine.org, and it just planning ahead, making sure these foods are available, setting your goals each week, have a game plan for eating. Every day I know pretty much what I'm going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's really good to plan ahead so that you don't get into a position where you don't have those foods available, or you end up not following what you had planned. So I guess my summary is that food is medicine. Your prescription is waiting in your kitchen. And I think that when we use food as medicine, we can actually get ourselves off of medication type of prescriptions and live a much healthier life. Here are my resources. Again, I would highly recommend getting that Harvard Healthy Eating Plate and the Lifestyle Medicine website for your resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. You know, here at the Food Bank, we deal with a lot of myths around hunger and food and health as well. And one of the things that the research recently has shown is that people who are food insecure often have to make trade-offs between medicine, medical care, and their food. And so what we find is that they are looking for cheaper foods, and which are often the less healthy foods. So Dr. Wagner, can you share just a couple of tips on what are some great affordable sources of food for the plant-based lifestyle? What's a great budget plan?
Well, that's the great thing actually about plant-based eating is, you know, people don't typically think of it, but if you look in the grocery store, beans, legumes, those foods are very inexpensive. It's a matter of cooking them and knowing how to cook them. But again, you can find recipes online all over the place. I'm sure that you guys give out recipes from time to time. And you know, there's always some great recipes available from things like your extension agent, community health workers. So look to those resources, but also the great thing about fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes is you can extend them over time. So if you don't use them the first time, just carry them over to another meal. Just store them properly to make sure that they stay safe. And lastly, I would say to shop the sales, because use the foods that are in season and look for your grocery flyers, which I guess now may be online these days. But finding out those foods that are on special because they happen to be in season, and then just changing your foods that you're using as the seasons change.